When we think of classic TV shows from the 70s, one that immediately comes to mind is The $6 Million Man. This iconic show captured the hearts of viewers with its futuristic themes and action-packed storylines. The star of the show, Lee Majors, became a household name forever associated with the character of Steve Austin, a man who was rebuilt with advanced technology after a near-fatal accident. The character was portrayed as a man who was part man, part machine, and his transformation into a cyborg became a defining element of the show's legacy. But what happened to the man behind the bionic eyes and incredible strength? Lee Majors didn't just act in The $6 Million Man, he became the face of the show. People knew him not just as an actor but as a symbol of a time when technology seemed to promise unbelievable possibilities. His role in the show earned him immense popularity, and millions of viewers tuned in week after week to see his character face challenges that were both exciting and emotionally complex. But this was just the beginning of his journey. It's easy to assume that someone who became so famous in one of the most successful TV series of its time would continue in the same path, constantly appearing in big roles and maintaining that level of fame. However, Lee Majors' life was far more complex than that. After the success of The $6 Million Man, many would expect a smooth transition into even more successful roles, yet his journey wasn't exactly as expected. In Hollywood, success can be fleeting. Many stars of the past have faded into the background as new generations of actors take over the spotlight. For someone like Lee Majors, who had been the face of such an influential show, it was a constant battle to remain relevant in an industry that moves on quickly. However, it wasn't just about finding new roles, it was about how he handled life after fame. What did he do when the camera stopped rolling, when the crowd stopped cheering, and when the demands of his previous life no longer existed? This is where curiosity starts to build. We are all familiar with the image of Lee Majors as the Bionic Man, the action hero who faced dangers with determination. But what happens when the role that defined you is no longer your reality? How does someone like Lee Majors, who was once known for performing stunts and displaying superhuman strength, transition to a quieter, more personal life? His story raises several questions that are not immediately answered. Did he struggle to find meaning outside the limelight? How did he adjust to life after being one of the most recognized faces in television? What choices did he make after the end of The $6 Million Man, and how did those choices shape the person he is today? These questions only deepen the mystery of what his life has been like since those famous days of playing Steve Austin. The curiosity lies in the unknowns. We know Lee Majors was a star, but what did he do when the show ended? Did he retire from acting, or did he continue to pursue new roles? Did he seek new forms of recognition, or did he prefer to live life away from the public eye? These are the kinds of questions that make his life story so intriguing. For many fans of the show, the transition from the heroic Steve Austin to the man behind the character is something they're eager to explore. How did Lee Majors handle the fame that came with his role, and what came after it? The audience may find themselves wondering if he struggled with being typecast, or whether he embraced the fact that he would forever be remembered for that one defining role. The tension between being known for one thing and trying to branch out into something else is a reality many actors face, and Lee Majors was no different. The fascinating part is how he navigated this. Rather than disappearing from the spotlight, Lee Majors continued to pursue acting in other projects, even if they weren't as big as The $6 Million Man. This journey wasn't about trying to replace his iconic role, but rather about figuring out who he was beyond the role of Steve Austin. This exploration of his life outside of the show opens up an entirely new narrative for those who grew up watching him. Fans and curious onlookers are eager to learn more about how someone with such a monumental career adapts to life when the cameras stop rolling. The public is often left to wonder about the inner life of celebrities. How do they cope with aging, with being famous at a young age, and with the inevitable changes that come as time passes? Lee Majors' story presents a unique look at how fame can both uplift and challenge a person, especially when it's linked to one specific role. In this part of the journey, there's no shortage of curiosity. The audience is not just interested in how Lee Majors looks today, but in how he feels about his past and how he moved forward in life. What does he think about his time on The $6 Million Man now? Did he have any regrets, or did he see it as a stepping stone to other things? These are the elements that keep us hooked as we dig deeper into his life after fame. When we think about someone like Lee Majors, it's easy to imagine that the actor who played Steve Austin, the Bionic Man, would still be living in the limelight today, surrounded by fame and fortune. After all, being the star of one of the most popular TV shows of its time would naturally mean that he'd continue to shine in the public eye. But that's not always how things work in the world of fame. After years of playing a character who was practically invincible, the real-life journey of Lee Majors took some unexpected turns, making us wonder what happened to him as time passed. How did he navigate life after the show ended? How did he adjust to a world where the cameras weren't always on him? This question of today holds a lot of mystery. The term itself sparks curiosity. What does today mean for someone who was once at the peak of their What does today mean for someone who was once at the peak of their career? What does life look like after the spotlights fade and the roles become fewer and farther apart? For Lee Majors, this transition wasn't easy. After his fame from the $6 Million Man waned, many expected him to disappear from the public eye altogether. But surprisingly, he didn't. The idea of what his life looks like today, many years after the height of his fame, is fascinating because it's not what people may have expected. Lee Majors wasn't just an actor, he was a symbol of a certain era, a time when the idea of technology blending with humanity felt like a thrilling possibility. When people saw him on TV, they saw more than just an actor, they saw a hero, a futuristic figure who overcame adversity. But once the show ended, what happened to that hero? What did he become when the cameras stopped rolling and the world moved on to new entertainment? What did he choose to do with the life he had after the fame? This part of his story invites us to dig deeper into the realities of life beyond celebrity. For some, fame is a fleeting moment that vanishes almost as quickly as it comes. But for others, fame becomes a long-lasting part of their identity, something that lingers long after the roles stop coming. Lee Majors had to deal with this reality in his own way. Instead of allowing himself to fade into obscurity, he made the conscious decision to continue his career in a different way. This decision is both surprising and intriguing because it shows how someone with such a massive public profile can choose to reinvent themselves and keep pursuing their passions even after the biggest moments of their career have passed. The curiosity begins to grow when we ask, how did he stay connected to his fans when he wasn't in the headlines as much? How did he feel about the inevitable shift that came with aging, and how did he adjust his personal and professional life to reflect this change? Lee Majors didn't simply walk away from acting, he continued to work, albeit in different kinds of roles. He found ways to stay relevant in the industry, making appearances in shows and movies, and even finding new forms of recognition. This is where his life becomes even more interesting. It's easy to assume that an actor's career peaks and then slowly fades, but Lee Majors shows that it's possible to keep going and redefine yourself in the face of change. At this point, the question remains, what made him continue to push forward when many others might have stepped back? Was it the desire to stay relevant, or was it something more personal? Was it the passion for his craft that kept him motivated, or did he find new purpose in life as time went on? These are the types of questions that keep the curiosity alive. We know that Lee Majors wasn't just about the fame, he was a man with depth and a story beyond the iconic role of Steve Austin. But what did that story look like after the show? Another layer of curiosity is how Lee Majors adjusted to life beyond the public eye. He didn't just retreat into a quiet life, he found ways to stay connected to his fans and continue acting in roles that allowed him to evolve. This reflects a different kind of determination. He wasn't just holding on to his past, he was using his experiences to fuel new opportunities. This transition from TV star to actor with a more varied career is something that many people can relate to. Everyone faces a shift in their life at some point, whether it's a career change, a move, or the loss of something important. Lee Majors' ability to continue his work, even if it was in smaller or different projects, speaks to his adaptability and his refusal to let go of the passion that made him a star in the first place. One thing that keeps us hooked in this part of his story is the idea that fame doesn't have to be the defining aspect of someone's life. As much as his role in the $6 Million Man defined his career, it didn't define his entire life. He found new roles and new opportunities that allowed him to still have a presence in the entertainment world, even if they were not as high profile as his original role. For Lee Majors, it wasn't about chasing after the same kind of success he had as a young man. It was about carving out a new path for himself, one that aligned more with who he was in the present. As we think about what his life is like today, it's fascinating to realize that there's a lot more to his story than just the fame from his past. His life now reflects the complexities that come with aging in the public eye. It's not just about how he looks or what he's doing, it's about how he has navigated the ups and downs of life in an industry that is constantly changing. The idea of someone staying relevant, passionate, and motivated in a field that is so focused on youth and change is inspiring. Lee Majors' journey from the $6 Million Man to today serves as a reminder that there is always room for reinvention and new opportunities, no matter how old you get or how far you've come. When someone is known for being a part of something as iconic as the $6 Million Man, the curiosity about how that person has changed over time is only natural. Lee Majors became a household name playing Steve Austin, a man who was transformed into a powerful bionic hero. The show was hugely popular, and fans followed his every move. But like all people, Lee Majors didn't remain frozen in time. He has changed just as anyone would after decades in the public eye. The question that arises is, how has he changed? What has life been like for him beyond the fame and the iconic role? What does he look like today, both in his career and as a person? The curiosity surrounding his transformation is fascinating because we often associate celebrities with their past roles. We remember them as the characters they portrayed, and it's hard to imagine them outside of that context. For Lee Majors, this has been particularly true. His role as Steve Austin became so closely tied to his identity that it's almost impossible to think of him without thinking of the Bionic Man. However, time has passed, and people change, evolve, and grow. Lee Majors is no exception. What makes this part of his life so intriguing is that the changes go beyond just his appearance. There are deeper transformations that have occurred in his personal and professional life. The hook here is the mystery of what Lee Majors looks like now and how he has evolved as a person. As we get older, we experience changes, both physical and emotional. Celebrities are no different. For someone like Lee Majors, who was once known for his youthful strength and invincibility, there is a natural curiosity about how he has dealt with the inevitable changes that come with age. How does he feel about the years that have passed? Has he embraced the changes, or does he still look back on his younger days with nostalgia? These questions stir up curiosity because they tap into a universal experience, the passage of time and the changes it brings. One of the most obvious changes that Lee Majors has undergone is his appearance. In the 70s, he was the picture of youthful energy, a fit and strong actor who embodied the idea of a man who could overcome anything. But as time has passed, just like all of us, Lee Majors has aged. The way he looks today is a far cry from the youthful bionic hero he once was. But this change isn't just about the natural aging process. It's also about how he has adjusted to the different stages of his life. Lee Majors didn't shy away from the reality of aging. Instead, he embraced it, showing that growing older doesn't mean disappearing into the background. He continued to act and engage with his fans in ways that allowed him to remain present in the entertainment world, even if he wasn't always the center of attention. But what about the emotional and mental changes? This is where the story becomes even more fascinating. After the fame of the $6 Million Man started to fade, Lee Majors found himself in a position many actors face after their biggest successes. What comes next? How do you deal with the fact that your face might not be on magazine covers anymore, and your career might not be what it once was? The changes Lee Majors experienced weren't just physical, they were also deeply emotional. To be known for one thing and then have to find your identity in something else is a difficult journey, one that involves self-reflection, growth, and sometimes even struggle. There, a natural curiosity about how someone who was once at the top of their game adjusts to a quieter, more private life. Does he miss the fame? Does he still long for the days of being in the spotlight, or has he found peace in a different kind of life? Lee Majors didn't disappear from the public eye completely, but his focus shifted. He took on roles that allowed him to expand his range as an actor, showing that he was more than just Steve Austin. These changes weren't just about finding new roles, they were about finding a new purpose. They were about evolving as a person and showing the world that even though he had been famous for one role, he was capable of more. The curiosity around Lee Majors' transformation goes beyond his physical appearance. People want to know how he has navigated the complexities of life after fame. For many people, aging can be a difficult process. There is the inevitable fear of being forgotten, of becoming irrelevant, and of losing the identity tied to youth and strength. Lee Majors, however, shows that it is possible to find meaning and success in later stages of life. His story encourages us to think about how we too will handle the changes that come with time. Will we shy away from them, or will we find new ways to grow and evolve? As Lee Majors got older, his roles and career choices also changed. He didn't just keep playing the same types of characters he was known for. Instead, he explored new opportunities. This transformation in his career is a crucial part of the changes he has undergone. It's a reflection of his willingness to reinvent himself and adapt to the new circumstances of his life. This decision to branch out and embrace new challenges reflects an important part of his journey. It's not easy to move on from something as iconic as the $6 Million Man, but Lee Majors did it in a way that allowed him to stay true to himself while also evolving as an actor and as a person. Sometimes in life we expect things to go a certain way, especially when it comes to celebrities. When someone becomes famous for a specific role, people often believe they will stay the same, always looking and acting like the character they once played. But life doesn't work like that, and people change in ways that surprise even their biggest fans. This is exactly what happened with Lee Majors. He was known all over the world as the strong and fearless Steve Austin from the $6 Million Man. He played a hero with super strength and bionic powers. Fans looked up to him, admired his confidence, and believed he could never be shaken. But as time went on, Lee Majors went through a transformation that no one saw coming. The reason this change is so shocking is because of how powerful and perfect his image used to be. He seemed almost untouchable, like a real-life superhero. His good looks, deep voice, and strong body made people think he would never grow old or slow down. But the truth is, even heroes are human. And when the world finally saw how different he looked years later, it created a wave of surprise. People began talking, asking questions, and wondering what had happened in all those years since the show ended. This transformation wasn't just about how he looked. Yes, people noticed his face had changed, his hair was gray, and he moved more slowly. But what really surprised everyone was how much he had changed as a person. In the past, he was always seen as serious and confident. Now in interviews and public events, Lee Majors seemed calmer, more humble, and even a little emotional. He talked about life in a way that showed he had learned many lessons. He spoke about losing people he loved, going through personal struggles, and realizing what really matters in life. What made this transformation so unexpected is that most fans didn't follow his journey closely after the peak of his fame. They remembered the young, powerful man from TV, not the older, wiser version he became. So when people finally saw recent pictures or watched new interviews, it felt like a shock. They saw someone who had been through so much and had changed deeply, both inside and out. The man who once symbolized strength was now showing a different kind of strength, one that came from experience, from pain, and from personal growth. Another part of this transformation that surprised many people was how he handled his career after the fame faded. Some actors hold on to their old image and try to stay in the spotlight forever. But Lee Majors didn't do that. He accepted that he couldn't always be the leading man. Instead of fighting against time, he chose to work in roles that fit his age and showed a different side of him. He appeared in small roles on TV, played fatherly figures, or took part in fun cameos. He even made fun of himself sometimes, showing that he didn't take fame too seriously anymore. This shift in attitude was something no one expected from the man who once played a perfect hero. There's also curiosity about his personal life. Over the years, Lee Majors went through ups and downs in his relationships. He had high-profile marriages, including one with the famous actress Farrah Fawcett. When their marriage ended, it became public news, and many thought he might not recover from the emotional pain. But over time, he found happiness again. He remarried and focused on building a quiet, peaceful life. This change in his personal life added another layer to his transformation. He was no longer the Hollywood heartthrob living a fast life. He became a man who valued peace, stability, and real love. That shift was unexpected, but it made people respect him even more. One reason this transformation catches so much attention is because of what it tells us about time. We don't like to think of our heroes getting older. We want to believe they will stay the same forever. But when we see someone like Lee Majors go through such visible and personal change, we're reminded that no one can stop time. Even the strongest people go through hard moments. Even the most successful stars have quiet days when the cameras are off. And sometimes that quiet life is where the real person shows up. Lee Majors' journey also brings up big questions. What happens when your biggest success is behind you? How do you keep going when the world no longer sees you as the star you once were? These are questions many people face, not just celebrities. That's why his story feels personal to many. It's not just about one man's transformation, it's about how all of us deal with change. We all grow older, we all lose things. We all have to find new meaning in different chapters of life. And Lee Majors did that in a way that feels real and honest. The shock isn't just about his looks or his slower pace, it's about how he opened up in ways he never did before. Fans who once saw him as a tough, quiet man now see someone who shares memories, feelings, and lessons. In recent interviews, he talks about the past with honesty. He talks about what he would do differently, what he regrets, and what he's proud of. This kind of openness is rare from stars of his generation. It shows maturity and growth. It shows that he is more than the character he once played. There is something powerful about seeing someone after many years, especially if that person was once a major celebrity. People change, life happens, and time leaves its mark on everyone. But when the world recently saw Lee Majors again, the actor who once played the legendary Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man, it was a moment of shock, wonder, and deep curiosity. The man who was once the face of action, adventure, and strength now looked completely different. And honestly, no one expected it. The curiosity starts from the simple fact that most fans had not seen Lee Majors in a long time. For years, he stayed mostly quiet, away from big Hollywood headlines. He lived his life in a more private way. So when pictures of him started showing up again, or when he appeared in interviews and public events, people were caught off guard. Could that really be him? The strong jawline, the firm voice, the smooth walk, they had all changed. But the most surprising part wasn't just how he looked. It was how different the whole energy around him felt. He was still Lee Majors, but not the one fans remembered from the 70s. This was a man who had lived a full life and now carried his history with him on his face, in his smile, and in the way he spoke. People were shocked because time had changed him in ways that felt personal. He now had white hair, a softer posture, and a slower walk. His voice, once deep and powerful, now sounded more relaxed. His eyes looked thoughtful, filled with memories that only someone who has lived through a lot could carry. Some people didn't recognize him at first. They had to take a second look, read the name under the photo, or hear him speak before they believed it was really him. That's how different he looked. But once they realized it was Lee Majors, the curiosity only grew. What had he been doing all this time? How had life treated him? What stories did he carry? When people saw him again, they weren't just looking at his face. They were looking at the time that had passed. For many, Lee Majors reminded them of their own youth. Watching The $6 Million Man as kids or young adults, they had memories tied to that show. So seeing him older also made them feel their own age. It made them reflect on how much life had changed for them too. That's the power of someone like Lee Majors. He wasn't just an actor, he was a part of people's memories. And now those memories were meeting reality in a very honest and raw way. But here's the most surprising part. Even though he looked older, he still had a strong presence. His smile could still light up a room. His eyes still showed confidence. The lines on his face told a story, not of weakness, but of wisdom. And in a way, seeing him now made fans respect him even more. He had not tried to hide from aging. He had not gone through major surgeries to look young forever. Instead, he accepted who he was. He allowed himself to grow older in front of the world. That takes courage. And that's what made people say, "You won't believe what he looks like today," not because it was bad, but because it was honest, real, and totally unexpected. This change was not just about appearance. It was also about attitude. In old interviews, Lee Majors was confident, often joking or talking about his role as a symbol of strength. But now he speaks more gently. He talks about family, about what really matters in life, and about how fast time moves. He talks about how proud he is of his past work, but also how he doesn't want to live only in the past. This kind of talk surprised many people. They were expecting to hear stories about fame and action, but instead they heard a man talk about peace, simplicity, and being thankful. That was not the Lee Majors they thought they knew. And it made them even more curious. What really shocks people is how he has accepted the passage of time. Many celebrities try to fight it. They try to stay young forever, chasing the image they had when they were most famous. But Lee Majors didn't do that. He allowed himself to grow, to age, and to change. And by doing that, he showed a kind of strength that is much deeper than muscles or action scenes. He showed the strength to be himself, no matter what others expected. This honesty is rare in the world of fame. It makes people take a second look. They stop and think, if Lee Majors can face the truth of time with such peace, maybe they can too. Maybe growing older isn't something to be scared of. Maybe it's something to respect. That's the kind of powerful thought that comes from seeing how much he's changed. Their quotes also something emotional about it. Fans who loved him for decades now see him as someone who feels like family. Watching him now is not just about entertainment. It's about connection. People want to know if he's happy, if he's healthy, and what kind of life he lives now. They wonder if he still talks to old co-stars, what he does in his free time, and how he spends his days. That kind of curiosity doesn't come from just any celebrity. It comes from someone who meant something to people, and who still does. In some ways, Lee Majors' transformation reminds people of their own journey. Everyone changes. Everyone grows older, but not everyone handles it with the same calm and dignity that he has. When fans see him now, they don't just see an older man, they see a full life. They see someone who has lived through fame, heartbreak, success, and silence. They see someone who once ran in slow motion on TV, now walking slowly in real life, and yet somehow still holding the same grace. The phrase "you won't believe what he looks like today" might sound shocking at first. But when people actually see him, they don't just see change, they see strength, wisdom, and honesty. And that's even more powerful than bionic arms or TV fame. Everyone remembers Steve Austin, the bionic man who could run faster, jump higher, and do things no normal human could do. He was more than just a TV character. He was a symbol of power, technology, and hope. But what many people forget is that behind this machine-like man was a real person. Lee Majors. For years the world was focused on the character. The action scenes, the slow-motion chases, the bionic eye, it was all so exciting. But what happened to the man who played him? That's the question that brings so much curiosity. People want to know what happened to the real Lee Majors after the cameras stopped rolling. At the height of his fame, Lee Majors was everywhere. He was not just acting, he was a huge part of pop culture. Kids wanted to be like Steve Austin. Adults admired him. Companies made toys, posters, and all kinds of products based on the $6 million man. Lee Majors had become a household name. But fame is like a wave, it rises, it shines, and then slowly it goes away. After the show ended, Lee Majors faced a moment that many stars fear. The spotlight moved on, the world wanted the next big thing. And the question became, what does a man do when he's no longer the machine everyone watched? This part of his life is where the real story begins. The man behind the machine had to find his own identity again. He had played Steve Austin for so long that many people only saw him as that character. But Lee Majors was more than a role. He was a human being with dreams, fears, and a life that needed meaning beyond television. After the $6 million man, he continued acting, but the roles were different. They weren't as big, and they didn't have the same kind of spotlight. But he accepted that. He didn't fight it. Instead, he slowly stepped into a more private, peaceful life. That choice surprised many people. Most actors try hard to stay in the spotlight, to keep their fame alive. But Lee Majors didn't seem to care about staying famous. He cared about being happy. He took time away from the media. He focused on things that mattered to him. This included time with family, close friends, and even quiet hobbies. He wasn't the bionic man anymore. He was just Lee, a man who had played a famous role, but had never let it completely define who he was. There's something very honest about that. It shows how strong he really was, not just on screen but in real life too. He didn't need to prove anything. He had already done something incredible. And now he just wanted to live like any other person. Of course, he never disappeared completely. He would sometimes appear in interviews, small shows, or fan conventions. And whenever he did, people were thrilled. They still remembered him. They still cared, and that meant a lot to him. But even as he returned to the public eye here and there, something had changed. The energy he gave off was no longer just about being a hero. It was about being real. He would talk about the past with kindness, not regret. He shared funny stories from the set, remembered his co-stars, and sometimes even laughed at how serious his character once seemed. This made fans feel closer to him. They saw not just the machine, but the man. And that man was kind, thoughtful, and full of life lessons. People often wonder if he missed being Steve Austin. The truth is, maybe a part of him always carried that role with him. After all, it brought him success, love from fans, and unforgettable moments. But Lee Majors didn't live in the past. He moved forward. He learned to enjoy the simple things. He remarried, he found love again, and he built a life that didn't depend on fame. This is something many stars struggle with. But Lee handled it with quiet strength. Another thing that makes his story interesting is how he aged with grace. Unlike many celebrities who try hard to look young forever, Lee Majors didn't try to hide his age. He let his hair go gray. He allowed wrinkles to show. And through it all, he smiled. That honesty made him even more respected. It reminded people that even a man who once played a machine was still human. And that human part was what made him special. There were times in his life that were tough. Fame can bring pressure. Relationships can be hard, and personal challenges don't stop just because someone is famous. Lee Majors went through those things too. He had moments of sadness, just like anyone else. But he didn't let those moments break him. He used them to grow. He became more understanding, more grounded. And every time he appeared again, people could see that growth. It quotes also interesting how technology has changed since he played a bionic man. Back in the 70s, the idea of someone with robot parts was just science fiction. Now we have real discussions about AI, robotics, and human-machine connections. Some people say that Lee Majors was ahead of his time. His character made people dream about the future. And now we're actually living in that future. That makes people look back at him with even more curiosity. They wonder what he thinks about today's world, and how close it has come to the things he once acted out on screen. What really happened to the man behind the machine? He lived. He changed. He grew older. But most of all, he stayed true to himself. Lee Majors didn't become a forgotten name. He became something better. An example. An example of how to handle fame, how to handle change, and how to stay grounded when the world around you keeps shifting. Fans still remember him, not just for the bionic powers, but for the way he made them feel. Safe, inspired, brave. And now when they see him living quietly, smiling in a simple photo, or speaking with warmth in an interview, they feel that same connection again. The machine may have been fiction, but the man behind it was always real.